What's up, people? Welcome to my show where I bring in different people from different backgrounds to showcase their talents and specialties to the world. Today I have with me a wonderful woman. She's not only an actress, she's done directing, she's done modeling, she also knows how to sing very well, and she's a great mentor to all kinds of people. We have Chrystee Pharris. So come on up, Chrystee.
All right, thank you.
Of course.
All right, I'm slide. Oh, dang it, I hit it. I was trying to slide in there and be smooth, but I guess I just wasn't smooth enough.
Well, we're not smooth all the times, but...
You're right. You just kind of play it off.
Yeah. So how's everything going?
Everything is well. Excited to be here with you, and it's just nice to be able to come in and be a blessing to the younger generation so that you guys out there can get some wisdom so that you don't fall into the same traps that we have fallen into. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I've always heard from older people, we depend on the younger generation to make things better for us.
That's true. That's true. We're depending on you. Oh my God! Wait, I'm the older generation now. What happened? Oh my gosh. Anyway, yes.
And my first question for you is like your upbringing. Now that we're talking about it, so I do understand that you are from Las Vegas, Nevada. So I was just wondering what it was like growing up there. And I gotta say, I don't travel that much, but I did go to Las Vegas the summer before I started freshman year, and I was just very surprised by the culture because I went there for a wedding, and it was very untraditional. They were playing Elvis music. It wasn't the traditional like wedding that you would have. So what was it like?
Oh, well, just being born and raised there, it was like growing up anywhere else. I remember when I was in school, when I was your age, we're talking about the 90s, and people were like, oh my gosh, like, do you live in a casino? And people didn't realize that we lived in regular houses. I mean, now we have the internet and people know, but I know a lot of people thought we were in a casino every single day, and we weren't. But it was like every other high school, every other, school. We had competitions and rivalries and, football games and so forth. And it was good. It was fun. It was just hot. But it didn't seem like it was hot back then. Because as a kid, you just wanted to be out of the house and hanging with your friends, so no one cared about the heat.
Yeah, when you talk about the heat, it kind of reminds me of the South, because I've heard how hot it is down there.
Oh, it gets hot. The difference is that there's a lot of humidity, so like my hair would be like, it would like swell up like this, whereas Vegas, there's no humidity, so everything is just kind of dry. But yes.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And my next question for you is, as a kid, have you ever traveled outside of Vegas? And if so, like, what places have you been to? And then how has it helped you grow as a kid, like evolve?
Yeah, I've been all over the world.
Wow.
Like even this past summer when we were on strike, we had an actor's strike and a writer's strike. And I spent 21 days in traveling through Europe. So I went to Norway and Germany and Budapest and Prague and Italy. And yeah, so I've been to South Africa and 35, states here in the U.S. So I've been to a lot of different places. And for me, being able to adapt to wherever you are in the world or in the States or, a different place, a different city is probably key, because some people can't translate the two. Like LA people can't always survive in New York, and New York people can't always survive in LA, or the Midwest or the South. You got to be able to adapt to all different types of people. And I think that's the reason why I have so many great friends, because I've learned so much from all of them that I can understand their background and who they are.
I like that, and it connects to who I am as a person too, because I try to be that person who can survive anywhere from New York, Texas.
Exactly.
And I try to have an open mind when it comes to meeting all kinds of new people, because everyone is different. And especially in high school, I don't know if you experienced this yourself, but there's all kinds of different cliques, like different groups of people. And some kids, they're just stuck to one particular group of people, the popular kids, the nerds, the jocks. But I get along with everyone, even the staff here.
Yeah.
And it helps you a long way, especially if you need something in the long run. Like as long as you treat those people with kindness, like they'll help you out.
And I think that's important, especially nowadays. You know, when I was growing up, first of all, I commend you for being that type of person, because not everybody's like that. But, and I was like that.
Wow.
I mean, I talked to every group of people. I mean, not only was it about, you know, your different cliques, you know, your smart kids, your jock kids, the cheerleaders, the band, you know, and then you had the awkward kids. You know, I was able to get along with everyone, and which is why I was class president and so forth when I was growing up. But I think it's even more so important for you to be able to get along, because now you're having more of those school shootings. And I think if more kids were not being bullied, then maybe we can try to stop some of that, because it just seems like a lot, well, some of them is definitely mental, for sure, could be. But I think a lot of it, like I think back on my growing up, I wonder if they had more guns during that time period in the 80s and the 90s, if we would have had more school shootings at my school, because I watched a lot of kids being bullied. And I was always friends with them, and I used to sit there with them and help them to try to get through it. So I think it's important that we be kind to people, like you just said. And that's why we have this new generation coming in, people like you, and who's going to make that difference and help people.
And have you ever dealt with bullying as a kid?
Yes, I definitely dealt with it, but I knew how to survive, and surviving was being funny. And, you know, people liked me and probably didn't like me all at the same time, because I had a lot of favoritism in school, you know, with the teachers, and so I think some of the kids didn't like that. And, but I definitely dealt with it, but I also knew how to get around it, you know, and that was by laughter and being kind and being nice. Doesn't always work, I'm sure, with some people, but for me, it happened to work.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And then my next question for you is, so your school setting, you did go to school, but what type of school was it? Like a public school, a charter school, private?
Mm-hmm. I definitely went to public school, but the area that I lived in was pretty, it was pretty well off. You know, I went to school with a lot of kids that were pretty rich. We weren't rich, we were middle class. By far, we were not rich. But it was a school that was, that had a lot of rich kids, you know what I mean? And so we didn't have a lot of craziness at our school, which was great. You know what I mean? We didn't have a lot of fighting or a lot of, you know, drugs or alcohol or that type of thing. And then I went to another school after that, which was like a parochial school. And again, that was where a lot of the kids that were, their economics weren't the best, but they were bused to school. And so actually, all the schools that I went to had that too. So, I mean, we had a very diverse group of people, you know, at the school. But yeah, it was fine. It was nice. I loved it. Everybody was cool pretty much, and everybody got along. And during my time, you know, there was a lot of a little bit of racial tension and stuff like that. But for the most part, we all got along. Everybody was cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's interesting you bring that up, because, I mean, it's still a thing, and it angers me when I see that, because we're now supposed to be at a point where it shouldn't be like that. And we have made some progress, but it's still a thing. And it just shocked me, because 2020 was a crazy year.
Right.
Yeah, not only with the pandemic, but the George Floyd protests. And then it just brings me back to this time when I met this black guy named Kobe, and he was just talking about how he was at this certain protest. I don't want to say what type, type,
Yep.
but he just didn't agree with it. He was shaking his head, and then he said that the guy came up to him, like to his car window, and was like knocking, and he didn't engage because there was a police officer nearby. And then he was like, I didn't want to engage because they would have pointed the finger at me.
Right.
And then he just gave me some advice about how he still has a love for this country despite what he's been through.
Yeah.
And then he just told me, God has a plan for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. It's, I just spoke at the Hollywood Museum out here for Black History Month, and it was, probably several hundred people that were there. And one of the things that I said is, listen, we all go through things, whether, you're black, you're white, you're big, you're short, whatever it is, blonde hair, gray hair, whatever it is, you're older, you're younger. Everybody has some type of ism thing where they feel self-conscious, about their whatever they're going through, right? So there's always going to be some type of racism against you, or whether you're blonde or black or whatever the case may be. You just have to be able to fight through that. And yes, I have been through some racial stuff in this business. I've been through racial stuff in school. I remember a teacher telling me, we have no parts for your kind, meaning, me being black. And it hurt me to my core, because here I am thinking, oh my God, I can't wait to audition. Like, oh my God, I'm gonna get this. And then somebody's like, yeah, they would never put you as a lead. And I've experienced that in this business, but at the end of the day, that no, somebody else gave me a yes. And it's hard not to want to give up. It's hard, but you just gotta keep going, because somebody's gonna give you a yes. And it's not gonna matter with your color, your race, what you look like. It's about your personality, and do they like your talent? You know what I mean? But we're all gonna go through, I think we're all gonna go through some stuff, and you just gotta keep pushing through.
Yeah, I mean, my mom was just telling me this, even my grandma has said it. Doesn't matter what ethnicity you are, what gender you are, your status, your political party, the human experience is challenging.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I mean, those words of wisdom, I wish I would have known that a little bit earlier in life, because I took things a lot personal, and I was crushed and devastated over some situations that happened in this business. But that's why you always have to have a team of friends. You have to have mentors that are going to be able to lift you up when you go through those times.
Yeah. And I see now why you are a mentor to the young generation, because it's not only about making sure we don't fall in the same traps as you, but I guess you just want to be there for us, because we all need that sometimes.
Absolutely, and I need it even at my age. I'm always constantly calling my mentor, who was on the Love Boat that nobody in here knows except for maybe your teacher, but yeah, the two that were on there that played the doctor and played Isaac the bartender, both of them are my mentors. And when I'm going through something, I get to call them on the phone and be like, oh my gosh, why? And then they always give me words of wisdom, and next thing you know, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm better now. You know what I mean? I can still do this.
Yeah.
I am talented. Despite what other people might think, that type of thing. So
I'm glad to hear that. And this is, I think you answered this already, but if you want to elaborate more. So if I were to meet you in high school,
Mm-hmm.
what was your personality like back then?
Oh, I'm still the same person.
I've heard that a lot.
No, I mean, I'm still the happy-go-lucky, I know what I want to do in life, and the inspirational person, and the person that's going to find you in the corner because you're crying, and I'm going to give you a big hug, and I'm going to say, you can do it. I was like that ever since I was little, and I'm still the same person. I was a little more naive back then. I wish I was still a little naive in that sense, and what I mean by that is like, not realizing how the world really can operate, You know what I mean? Like, or you're like, oh my gosh, why would somebody be that way towards me? I wish I would have still had that innocence. But for the most part, I'm happy with where I am.
I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you.
And yeah, I mean, honestly, like when I think of how I am now, and then like becoming an adult, in some ways I wouldn't want to change who I am, but for the most part, I do want to work on my flaws, like the bad stuff to me.
Yep.
That's the only stuff I want to work on. But the other stuff, I just want to I don't want to change.
And you know, I think that's the key, and I think that's what's going to make you have great relationships in your life, is because you're always constantly working on yourself. The only thing I would add to that is that I wish somebody would have told me is that when somebody, let's say you get into a relationship and somebody does you wrong, you know what I mean? The person that you're with and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they did me that way. Don't let that change you, because then you start to become bitter, and then you start to become afraid, and then you start to not want to, you know, take chances. You know what I mean? That's where I wish I would have been able to stay naive, because I was so bold, you know, until I had a director, famous director, comedy director, basically not want me to even audition because I was black, and didn't even give me an opportunity, and then treated me like crap when I went into the audition. And that put me in a state of fear for the first time in my career, where I was like, oh my gosh, can I do this? Am I even good? Like, I allowed that to affect my my auditioning and the rest of my career. And so my thing is, my advice that I would give to everybody out there is, don't allow things like that affect you. You keep doing what you're going to do.
And, you know, speaking of that, at what age did you know that you wanted to get into this business and become an actress?
I knew what I wanted to do when I was 4. 4 years old. I knew I was going to be an actor. Nobody was going to tell me that I wasn't going to make it. Even when I went through stuff in college and, you know, they tried to discourage me, I was like, do you not know I'm Chrystee Pharris? And then I moved to Hollywood, and I booked 7 shows in 6 months, and then I booked a series, and none of the kids that I went to school with has a career like I have right now, that I was, you know, in class with. None of them have a career like mine.
Because,
Yeah, you know, I mean, they just, for whatever their reasons are, but all of them that treated me like I wasn't good enough, like, you know, because things that I made up in my head, maybe because I didn't have the money, or I didn't have, or because of my skin color, because I was the only African American in that whole entire class. Whatever it was, that they felt like, you know, I wasn't good enough, I'm the one who made it.
And I noticed that in a bunch of famous people. I mean, they started out as kids getting bullied, and like now they're the famous ones. Yeah. Whereas the bullies, they're the ones that are struggling.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they may have had the popularity in high school, but none of that stuff matters.
Yeah, none of those kids none of them are doing well. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not in a spite, like, oh my God, look, see, I made it and you didn't. It's not that. It's just, you shouldn't treat people that way.
Because karma.
You know, you just shouldn't treat people that way. And the same thing with some of the teachers. You shouldn't treat kids that way.
I understand you went to Emerson College, mm-hmm. and there are a lot of famous actors and actresses who have chosen not to pursue college. Mm-hmm. But the fact that you wanted to, why did you want to pursue college?
Yeah, I think college, I think I just wanted more experience. You know, I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I got to go to college because, you know, you got to get this degree and I got to do this and all that. But I think college for me was to get more experience, and I think that's what kids miss because their parents are always pressuring them about going to college. You don't go to college just because you want to get that degree. You want to go to college because you want to learn what it is that you want to learn to become a master at it so that you can make a living off of it. So for me, I went to college because I wanted to get more experience. And it also gave me the freedom to learn how to be on my own and take care of myself, so that when I moved to LA to be by myself, because I didn't have family here, I knew what to do and how to balance a checkbook and do the credit cards, and where now you guys have the internet where you can learn all that stuff. But back then we didn't even have cell phones. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, it was a time for me to learn how to grow up and take care of myself and be on my own and be able to master my craft and what I wanted to do. Don't just go to college and spend all that money to just get a degree and you don't use it. You want to be able to understand what it is that you want to go and the field that you want to go in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, why spend all that money and the student loans and all that, or why waste money if you're not going to use it to its fullest to get you where you want to be, so that you can make 6 or 7 figures or whatever it is that your goals are.
Yeah, and what was that college experience like? I mean, you've already described a little bit of it. It sounded like you had fun.
I mean, yes and no. It's look. I don't know your demographic here. If you have a mix of like black, white, or different types of ethnicities. But I went to a school that was predominantly white, and so and rich, and so it became a little bit of a challenge because there were things that were a little racial. You know what I mean? Where, like I said, we have no parts for your kind, or we can't put you as a lead, or we're going to do this show just so that you could be the lead. So we're going to do this, type of show. And it's like, no, I want to get the role because I feel like I'm the best, and I don't want to not get it because I'm black. So I had stuff like that happened. Mm-hmm. But I also missed out on opportunities because I limit my own self because of a couple of incidences that happened on campus. Like somebody wrote the N word with the B word following afterwards on one of the door that was next door to mine, where a black girl lived in that dorm room. And so when those little things started to happen, I allowed that to affect the rest of my friendships with people at school, and it shouldn't have been that way. I should not have allowed one person or a couple of people who did some racial things to affect the rest of my friendships with everybody else that went to the school. So I also take responsibility in not enjoying my experience because I just assumed everybody was like that. You know what I mean? Because I was young. I was 18. Like, we all think that we're grown, but hindsight looking now that I'm as old as I am now, I would have done things a little bit differently. I wouldn't have categorized every single person, like every black person being this way or every white person being this way. I wish I would have allowed every single person to have their chance, and that is why my experience probably wasn't the best, was because I don't think I gave, after some of those incidences happened, also towards me, I allowed that to affect the rest of my friendships. And how I viewed the teachers and how I viewed the rest of the class. Just like I said earlier about those students, maybe they weren't looking at me a certain way, but that was my perception on it because that's the label that I put on me based on the experiences that I had with other people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they might not have been thinking that way,
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that sometimes you have those experiences, and it's because of that where your outlook on people, it changes, and you start to view people in a negative way, in a bad way, even though...
And you didn't even meet them.
Yeah.
You didn't know them. You're like, why? Why did I do that? And I just want to share that with you guys because, you guys are going to be looking at college soon, or just the world in general, and I don't want you guys to label every single person a certain way just because you had one bad experience with someone. And if I had, not that I didn't know that, but I just allowed my whole entire 4 years of Emerson not to be the best when it could have been. Maybe. you know? So.
And despite what you've been through in college, how did you still maintain the success that you've been able to have as an actress? Like those bookings that you talked about.
Yeah.
How'd you do it?
Networking, friends, people who just looked at me and said, oh my God, you're such a great person. Let me give you an opportunity. And, you know, I can't give you the job, but I can at least get you through the door. You can come in and audition. But I'm also a hustler, so I had friends who were, man, listen, I was gonna book a job because I didn't have an outside job. Like, I was just an actor. I didn't think I was smart enough to do anything else because I'm dyslexic. So I was like, I cannot work in an office. But I had friends who were PAs or, you know, like assistants who worked on different shows, and they would say, hey, Chrystee, they're looking for somebody to play 16. You know, and that was all the Sisters and Moeshas and Seventh Heavens and those shows. So I would say, hey, can you get me on the lot? And I'll just go to the casting director, and I would get on the lot. They would help me get on. I would be nice to security, be like, hey, good to see you again. And even though I had never seen them before, or, you know, I'm sure they didn't remember me. And I would get on the lot, and I would pass my picture and resume to the casting director, and then I would call my agent, and I would say, hey, can you pitch me to such and such casting? They're looking for somebody to play 16, African American. And then, you know, they would be like, yeah. And then next thing you know, like a week or two later, I would book it. I booked the show, and that's how I booked Kenan and Kel and Steve Harvey and, you know, all those shows back then. But that was all my own networking and placing myself in the right position to get the job. And then having the confidence to go in and actually do the audition, because I remember Steve Harvey giving me an opportunity to go in and audition.
Wow.
And I remember just being so scared. Like, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna go to the bathroom by myself. Oh my God. But I walked in like, hey. And I went in there and I did my job and I booked the job. And the thing is that you guys have to realize, if you're trying to get into this business, you have to have confidence. If you don't have confidence, why in the world would anybody give you $25,000 to play this part, you know, as a guest star on a show or reoccurring on a show or a lead in a movie, or $100,000 for a project, if you're not confident? If you're walking in and you're like, oh yeah, you know, yeah, this is what I do, or oh yeah, I wasn't really that good. If you walk in like that, who wants to put in that much money into? Because every time you mess up on set, it's like $100,000 a minute that is wasted. So you have to walk in with confidence, and you have to be like, yeah, I'm amazing. I'm great at what I do, you know? And then you got to be able to back it up.
Yeah.
You know, but I walked in with a lot of confidence, and that's a good part of the reason why. And then, because here's the thing, if you're an actor, there's going to be, at the end of the day, after they've seen, you know, 100 people in the pre-reads, when they get down to the last 10, there's only going to be 3 of us that can actually do the job. So of those 3, they're going to go with the person that they have a relationship with, not in a like, oh, we're friends, but a relationship with like, oh yeah, I know that kid. Yeah, I've heard some really good things about that person. Or yeah, I know that person. You know, they're such and such and such as friend. They vouch for them. They just want to make sure that they can get somebody on the set who can do the job. So that's what you want to make sure, that you go in with your confidence, and hopefully maybe you might actually know 1 or 2 that you've met and they can be familiar with you, and you might be able to just pull it off and get the job.
I feel like you just said all of that very well.
Well, thank you.
And, you know, you talked about, you know, Steve Harvey. Like, you know, what was it like interacting with Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, because I know he was in the Steve Harvey show as well. You know, Brandy Norwood,
yeah.
Kenan Thompson, all of those people. What was it like working with them?
I mean, they were just all cool, you know, and back then that was in the beginning of our careers, and so everybody was just, you know, like just a really cool group of people. The one person I do have to give the most credit to is Steve Harvey, though, because he was like, I remember I was an intern, actually was an intern across the hall from his office where he did his show. And I met him, and he was just like, you just seem like you got a good heart. You feel like, it seems like you fear the Lord. Let me tell you about this business. And he told me, he said, every time you step out of the house, you better look like you can step on set. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, that's easy for you to say. You got Steve Harvey money. Like, I'm an intern in college. And what I'm glad he said that to me, because the day before, this guy from Young and the Restless, executive producer, kind of yelled at me. I was delivering scripts, and he was in a bad mood, and I delivered the script, and he was like, who are you? What are you doing in here? That was a Tuesday. Wednesday, Steve said what he said to me. Make sure you get dressed up. That night, my girlfriend did my hair for free. She was a hairdresser. And the following day, I got all dressed up. And I went back into Ed's office, or into the office, Young and the Restless. And the same guy who was like, who are you? He literally was like, hey, who are you? Oh my gosh, what's your name? Da da da. And sat there and had a conversation with me. And 5 months later, the week that I graduated from college, I tested with Shamar Moore for Young and the Restless. I didn't get it, but it showed me what Steve Harvey said was exactly right. You need to dress the part. Whatever it is that you want to be in life, you need to dress the part and let people see you that way. Because if you don't look the part, nobody's going to ever be able to picture you in that position.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah, it was the best thing he could have ever told me, and it made a difference. Now every time I go out, go to the grocery store, I look like an actor, and people be like, oh my God, you must be an actor. Like, here's my card, I'm a producer, I'm a director, I'm a casting director. And some people, I'm sure, are shady.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But for the most part, I met some really great people just because people said, oh my God, you look like an actress. And that's how I booked a lot of those shows.
So, the credit goes to Steve Harvey there.
Yep.
And then my next question that I have for you is, it's been something that's been happening within like the last year, but the Screen Actors Guild, a lot of writers, actors, I understand they've been affected pay-wise because they haven't been getting paid fairly.
Right.
So I was just wondering what kind of impact that had on you.
Yeah, so I can break it down for you. So for instance, I could do a show, let's just say I make $1,000 for a show, right?
Yeah.
Guest star, whatever, voiceover, whatever the case may be. If it's on NBC, ABC, CBS, which were the major networks, we get, when it re-airs, $1,000 again, and then $980, and then, $900, and then $800, $700, and it keeps going down. So we could live off our residuals, which is, it's never about the initial airing, it's about the residuals that we get every time it airs afterwards. What happened was, with streaming, we would get the $1,000 for the first pay, and then after that, when it would re-air or stream, we would only get like $27. So you go from all of that extra money that we would live off of to getting nothing. And that's why we had to fight, because people could not survive off of that. And it's unfair. And the other thing is that the streaming networks were not providing how many people were actually watching the shows or the episodes, because if it's Friends, when Friends was on, you could tell them, oh, this is how many viewers you have because of the Nielsen ratings, and then you can say, well, now you guys have to pay us $1 million an episode, which is what Friends did, and that's why they got paid $1 million an episode, because they knew how many people were watching. With streaming, they're not telling us, or they weren't telling us how many people were watching, so we have no negotiation power to say you need to pay us more.
And, I do want to talk about that because, actually my mom was telling me the story because she loves watching Friends.
Yeah.
And she was telling me the behind the scenes story about how all of them, they were pulled into a private room and somebody would tell them, you have more talent than these people. I'm willing to pay you this amount of money.
Yep. And
they all stayed strong and said, nope, we're all going to get paid the same amount, including residual ratings. And it worked.
Yep.
And, it just doesn't make sense how people like you who were impacted by the Screen Actors Guild, like while there's other well-known actors and actresses who aren't affected. So I'm thinking, like, how does that work, and like, why is that?
It's because you I'm going to answer that. That light is blinking. I don't know if it's getting ready to go dead. If it makes a difference or not. The camera.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Okay.
It's good.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry, that's the producer side of me that I gotta. You're not directing. But what makes the difference is who represents you. If you have somebody like, you know, CAA or anything, you know, like a high end, you're going to have more negotiation power than a little smaller agency. And that's unfortunately part of the problem, is that everybody's not on the same playing field, you know. Whereas, you know, I remember doing a long time ago, like I remember doing something and I played a lead and somebody else got more money and got all the perks and the bells and whistles because my agent wasn't strong enough to negotiate more. And I didn't get what I deserved to have gotten paid. And I was the lead. I mean, like, one of the leads, and that other person wasn't. But if you don't have the right agency who has the power or the right agent, manager, or lawyer to be able to negotiate those deals, you're going to get the raw end of the stick. And then you have to ask yourself, is it worth taking the lower rate just because now you get to work? Or do you hold out and wait to get what you deserve to get paid? But if you do that, then you might not work at all.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you don't want to be bitter either, you know, so.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
Oh yeah, I mean that was a long time ago. Trust me, I've fixed that problem. That will never happen again. I'm sure it could possibly, but not to that capacity. You know.
And are you still affected by that, or like by the Screen Actors Guild and like the unfair pay?
Well, and again, I want to make sure that you know it's not the Screen Actors Guild that is doing it. It's more the studios and so forth. And so are we still affected by it? Yes. So for instance, like right now, I did a show, because I did like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and all. I did all the animation and the, not animation, with Zoe and all of them. I do voiceovers for all those different things, right? Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of voiceovers. If you're not careful, some of these studios will not even put you on the residuals where you're getting residuals for that stuff. So right now, this whole group of us that did this voiceover for a particular movie, we now have to fight, go to SAG and say, hey, we never got paid for residuals, and now we have to fight for that. So does it still happen? Absolutely. But does it happen all the time? No. There are a lot of great people who take care of us. Absolutely. So I'm not saying every single person is bad. You just have to understand the business of acting and make sure that you are staying on top of it to make sure you get paid.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have to cut it short. But thank you again for being here today, and you're a wonderful person.
Thank you very much.
And that's it for the Amado Lucero Show. Stay tuned in.
Thank you.
Very, very nice.